You wake in mud. The holy city smells like sun-bleached flesh, not incense. You dreamed your sandals would brush gold and miracle, instead your soles stick to blood and pus slicker than any Saracen oil. You prayed for Jerusalem, and Jerusalem coughed up scabs and worm-eaten saints. Did you really believe God owed you a sunrise free of fever? Welcome to the consecration of boils. The Pope sang Deus Vult, but the only chorus out here is the sound of vomiting sergeants and screaming horses. The ground is holy because it devours more of you with every hour. Your oath was supposed to clasp you in sacred armor. Instead, it gnaws at your ribs while lice storm your flesh. William of Tyre wrote of knights, inflamed by zeal and faith, marching to Jerusalem as if called by Gabriel himself. Perhaps he missed the part where dreams of glory met rivers of offal. That's the miracle. You inherit a city besieged so often that martyrdom has become just another contracted disease. You did not claim God's city. You drowned in it. You wonder if the Grail was ever found, or if it was just the echo in a knight's bladder rattling with thirst. Blessed are those who hunger for righteousness, the preacher shouted. But out here righteousness tastes of brackish water and bone splinters. So you take your vow again, this time to the maggots. Jerusalem was never taken, only host to the fever that takes you. Glory isn't a chalice. It's the taste of iron as your gums split chanting, "Holy, holy, holy," with blistered lips and a sucking wound for a soul. You wanted baptism in holy water, but the siege drowns you in blood, piss, and smoke. The city walls mock you. Heat shimmers not with heavenly fire, but with the stench of burning hair and fat. Every sunrise is a blasphemy. Instead of cherubs, you get the howling of wounded mules and the shriek of iron scraping flesh. You did not come to witness miracles. You came to be marinated in your neighbor's terror. You learned quickly that armor is just a coffin carried upright. The ground churns with viscera and shattered arrowheads, each step a communion with the slaughtered. Blessed are the peacemakers, your priest whimpers breathing through fingers caked with gore, but out here peace is the moment before the next stone crashes your skull. William of Tyre claimed the faithful were strengthened, but your faith is only as sturdy as your gut, and yours crawls with rot. They tell you the siege brought the city nearer to God. All you see is bread made of weevil and water sour with ghosts. Every Templar oath that once rang with purpose now lands on tongue-torn lips too cracked for psalms. When torches hit the ramparts, the night becomes a womb for screams holy, red, and endless. You swear this must be what the apocalypse smells like, a trickle of blood soaked into the book of Revelation. By noon, bodies pile faster than the prayers. Squires shovel filth atop corpses to sweeten the air. The stench still lathers your lungs, sacrament and sickness joined in the throat. You look down and realize your hands, trembling, clawed-stained, perform their own grisly litany. Jerusalem promised heaven. The only gates you storm lead straight to the meat locker. Here salvation is a coin minted from suffering, and the Lord takes his tithe in sinew, not song. The city burns, and so do you, eternally anointed, a crusader's soul scalded clean on the threshold of paradise, denied entry by a heap of unshriven flesh. The king shits where his horse bled out. Crown-rusted majesty drowned by flies, gold leaves fingerprints in pus. You think royalty smells like frankincense, but here it's spoiled meat and the tinny reek of old wounds. The royal pavilion is a tent of rot, not silk. The banner of salvation droops over puddles of bile and broken command. Listen, they called these men God's anointed, led into Jerusalem by prophecy and perfumed with prayer. But William of Tyre saw Richard the Lionheart hacking through corpses, not heretics, more butcher than sovereign. Faith tells you that a king stands apart. Templar steel tells you he's ragged and coughing blood like everyone else. You want to kneel for blessing, but the king's hands are slick and shaking, already digging his own shallow grave. Congratulations. You just pledged your soul to a flag covered in boils. When leaders are hunted, the chain of command runs red with panic. The crusader strategy is a fever dream. Lines break on rumor, lords vanish beneath horse guts, and unity gets gnawed bone clean by ambition. There's no royal face left, only masks of terror bobbing atop a tide of mail and gore. You whisper prayers for divine protection, but the arrows punch through crowned heads as quick as squire skulls. A crown won't shield you from plague, nor will God lift a finger to steady the hand that drops the siege ladder into your guts. When kings become prey, the myth of order collapses, and every suck-down gasp, every royal scream swallowed by the siege, is just another verse to your heretic psalm. All you inherit is the taste of brass, and the sting of abandonment. Leadership is only ever sacred until you watch a king torn apart by dogs in the rubble, jaw still moving like he might bless the ruin with his last blood-choked breath. You want to touch the true cross with lips unchapped to press your brow against the veiled edge of heaven. Instead, you kneel in mud laced with entrails, the holy splinters dragged through excrement and ooze. The relics meant to shield you now gag on the same filth as your dying brothers. You were promised the taste of miracle. All you get is the copper bite of blood and burnt parchment choking the altar smoke. You think faith is a bulwark, but every saint's knuckle and splinter of Christ's cross is hustled through the siege lines like a charm at a gutter market. One moment the reliquary floats above the mob carried like the ark. The next it's trampled beneath the boots of men shrieking for water, for mercy, for mothers they do not remember. Blessed are the relic thieves you spit as Templars barter finger bones for wine and rags. In the chaos, even the wind seems to rattle with heresy, carrying gossip about sacred bloodlines, and the Grail not as a cup, but as a secret wound, a blasphemy scrawled on the underside of every chalice. William of Tyre tried to tell you that the true cross led armies. Now it lies abandoned, soiled, and snapped, its wood whittled down to toothpicks and bargaining chips. Holy blood is less precious than the pus boiling from arrow wounds. Your faith, once gilded, now dissolves into something that stains and stinks. Pray all you want, relics never fed the starving or resurrected the men whose fingers they display. You keep a splinter in your pouch against despair, but it feels cold, heavier than a stone, and you realize the only thing sanctified here is the rot. Faith drowns not in disbelief, but in a chalice of blood and sewage. The relics in your trembling hand are nothing but teeth for the worms who always inherit Jerusalem. You walked beneath a banner that promised salvation and found yourself ankle-deep in intestines, some whispering mercy, some just steaming. The sword does not care who knelt this morning. It does not squint at the beads you clutch or wonder which direction you prayed. Steel's judgment is blind, but the blood flowing in the dust knows every name. In this city, believer is another word for target. Crusaders, Saracens, priests, and children, each sentenced by whichever hand steadies the blade. William of Tyre wrote of the righteous, sweeping through the city like a storm from heaven. What he left out was the gnawing, the screaming, the shuffle of feet slick with holy carnage. The holy men you followed now slip on gristle and curse louder than the infidels they flay. You chant psalms with your mouth, but your eyes can't look away from the butcher's Sabbath at every altar. You keep waiting for the sword to pause at the threshold of a saint or a shrine, but Jerusalem's stones thirst for blood, not catechism. Templar or imam, every skull cracks the same. Splinters of relic wood spattered with brains drift in puddles beside shattered icons and children's shoes. You did not charge for glory, the emptiness mocks. You charged for a cup no one could prove existed, and left the city brimming with rot. You once believed judgment would taste like honey and wine, God's chosen sorting the damned. Instead it tastes like brass and bile sharp, an endless a purification only worms and crows dare savor. The sword's final mercy. It leaves you wondering if God watched any of it, or if he turned away sickened as fast as you did. The city groans. You expected the inside of Jerusalem to taste like honey, but it's all ash and teeth rot leaking from the cracks in every wall. The air is sour with sweat and prayers mouthed by tongues numb from thirst. You were promised deliverance, but you stagger through alleys where saints would fear to tread bones, poking through rags, bellies hollow as reliquaries. You listen to the scrape of spoons against empty pots, music for the damned. Rats once an abomination become currency, their flesh more holy than a priest's absolution. The dregs of faith are traded for withered onions, a crucifix swapped for a crust of bread. In the Knights Templar, a new history the chronicles count not heroes, but the starving defenders gnawing leather children digging grave pits with their bare hands. Hunger is the only relic that never breaks. Sometimes you think you hear the grail beneath the bedlam. Not a cup, but a bleeding womb, or the low moan of a mother selling her swaddled hope for a handful of flour. You pray until the blood sours in your gums, and your knees blister scarlet against the stones. The saints outside these walls wore their wounds for penance. Inside you wear yours just to live to morning. You believed survival was noble. Now you sell a brother for a mouthful of marrow and barter your soul for water steeped in shadow. William of Tyre, singing of steadfast hearts, never told you desperation can outlast faith. You crawl from chapel to dung heap, one prayer left: let the enemy come quickly, sword or famine, as long as they end this silence. Sometimes you wonder, did anyone ever take Jerusalem? Or did it just swallow one starving army after another, sated only by despair? It was supposed to smell of sanctity, incense, sweat, fraternity hammering pure gold into the leprous flesh of faith. But what hits you first is the stink of secret feasts burrowed behind chapel doors. While you gnaw a rotten bone in the square, the brothers chew fat in candle-lit vaults, whispering prayers of gratitude with greasy mouths. The holy rule tastes like betrayal, blood and bone for the crowd marrow, and wine for the initiated. The brotherhood promises hunger as virtue, but only if everyone's watching. You watch saints shrivel beside casks locked tight by oath and privilege. The Templars, sworn to poverty, guard their cellars with more zeal than the city's gates, spilling more blood over a crust of bread than at the breach. It is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle, but here the hoarders are crowned with laurel and iron, stuffing sacred relics up their sleeves while beggars choke on their own tongues. In the Knights Templar, a new history, the oaths are parchment-thin, splitting at the first whiff of salt pork. Brotherhood decays, and all your prayers become currency. Blessings exchanged for moldy cheese, forgiveness for a handful of beans. You tell yourself you're marching with saints, but every ration denied, every locked storeroom says you're nothing more than carrion picking through apostolic refuse. When bread is sacred, the real relics are crumbs. The Grail is no chalice, it's the last spoonful secreted under a monk's lie-scrawled habit, an idol made of pantry and panic. So you gnash your teeth and spit your final prayer, not for God nor for Jerusalem, but that the next traitor chokes on the bounty he hid while you starved. The only thing left brotherly in these walls is the way greed grinds you all down to the same gnawed bone, saint, hoarder, and worm alike. The torch hisses, iron spits. You enter the order for absolution, and now you shiver, naked wrists shredded by rope and shame. The confessor's breath stinks of onions and God's counterfeit. The word here is whispered through cracked teeth between sobs and rising bile. Glory is a bruise, revelation peels the skin from your tongue. Prayer is a plea to faint before they ask you again. Confess, they croon, and the rack creaks louder than any psalm. Your sins multiply with every turn, spit on the cross, kiss your brother, worship a cat with coals for eyes. Truth becomes whatever survives the bone-splitting stretch. In the trial of the Templars, the record is a litany of agony, confessions torn from shattered mouths, heresy not found in souls, but in the joints dislocated by holy hands. The only article of faith left is that everybody breaks. You believed the gospel could be recited, not gouged one vowel at a time from your larynx. Now your savior is the man who tightens the tourniquet before the inquisitor returns. Perhaps the grail was never a cup, you mumble, but an empty promise poured down every throat. They smear your spit on their quills, penning the names of your dead as proof of Satan's pact. William of Tyre wrote, "Not all men are steadfast." You recite these words with a mouthful of your own blood, wondering if he ever saw a rib crack like dry kindling. You didn't charge for glory. You were sold by your brothers, bartered to the flames for a pardon nobody ever grants. The Iron Christ gives no benediction, only rope-burn aureoles and confessions that echo longer than sainthood. When torture is the only gospel, heresy isn't just a rumor, it's the only prayer anyone listens to. The Grail veils itself in incense and fever dreams. Yet here you are, knuckles split, clutching nothing but a myth that stole your marrow. You prayed for the blood of Christ and instead sliced open your hands on splintered wood, while Jerusalem wept blood and pus on your armor. You wanted purity. What you got were lips blistered by thirst and relics poisoned by the hands that touched them. Perhaps the Grail was never a cup, the air whispers, but the wound that will not close, bleeding hope into the sand. Every crusader hung his soul on that vision. A chalice no living eye had seen, a relic that promised absolution for 1,000 amputations. Chroniclers painted it in gold leaf, but as the holy blood and the holy Grail spits into the wound, the true curse was not its absence, but the rot it pumped through every oath and army. Saints marched and kings were crowned, then butchered, gutted, left to rot in sight of the relic they would die for. You did not find salvation, you found only the emptiness left behind by the dream. You choke on the irony, you didn't charge for glory. You charged for a cup no one could prove existed, and left your faith fermenting in trench water tainted by envy and slaughter. Ancient blood spattered your blade, but nothing washed out the taste of blasphemy. Grail legend became an excuse to gnaw on each other's bones, to hunt for a secret holy bloodline, while starving on the filth and offal of the so-called promised land. So this is your inheritance, a Grail-shaped absence, turning every prayer rancid and every triumph to ash. The quest was never holy. It was a chalice overflowing with everything Jerusalem could not forgive. And every time you drink, it's only to taste how deeply you've been cursed. You break the gates with fists blistered to the bone, your victory song drowned by the stink, burnt fat tar, and the sweet tang of corpses open to the sun. The stones do not echo with hosannas, they weep slick with gore grinding beneath your boots. Instead of paradise, you swallow a mouthful of ash and teeth, triumph scraping your throat raw. The city everyone prayed over is a bowl for blood and bile, no more sacred than a butcher's table. You stormed Jerusalem for God's glory, but every alley groans with butchered saints and children. William of Tyre urged the faithful to enter in joy, but you wade through red pools that swallow joy whole and spit out only bones. You find a scrap of bread on a shrine crusted with brains, and eat it too hungry to care which martyr bled here last. Blessed are the helmets that caught more puke than arrows. Your faith ends where the rot begins. Templar banners hang limp, stained with everything except pride. The Grail is as hollow as your stomach, a legend eaten by flies, and the true cross splinters under the weight of corpses stacked as high as the altar. The Knights Templar, a new history, records this as conquest. You just call it a harvest of ghosts. You hunted holiness and caught only crows. Breathe deep, each gasp chokes on soot and the promise of a city cursed by every hand that seized it. Victory tastes like ash because after everything, Every blade, every prayer, every drop spilled in the name of salvation. You learn the only thing Jerusalem ever truly gives is the hunger to take it again, and again, and again. The road to Jerusalem stinks of dried sweat, burned onions, and the wet decay where hope crawled off to die. You set out with prayers stitched into your boots, gold leaf promises crackling on your tongue. It's not holy ground. It's a rut of bones and maggot-laced dreams, a sacrament of dust and lies. You taste the iron tang of blood before you ever glimpse a damn relic. Every step drags the dream deeper into its own grave. The Templars shine from a distance, but up close rust blooms on every blade, and piety is just another ration to be stolen. You barter for water with teeth, skin your faith down to the bone, for a scrap of moldy bread promised by some cackling preacher already gnawing at your soul. According to Joinville, a night's journey was supposed to make the heart steadfast. Your heart is only steadfast because it's pickled in fear and starvation. You meet fellow pilgrims, eyes empty, lips cracked, trading tales of miracles that always lie one town away. The road is a market for broken vows. One sells his rosary for soup, another rips pages from a psalter to bind a bleeding foot. The holy blood and the holy grail speaks of hidden lineages, mysteries slithering under your feet. But the only secret you learn is how much suffering a man will swallow before learning to spit prayers as curses. Blessed are the helmets that caught more puke than arrows, blessed the feet that still move even socked in plague. The pilgrim's path is paved not with salvation, but the brittle bones of promise breakers, and the ash of hope ground fine beneath every starving heel. By the time Jerusalem's walls rise before you, smoke black, ever hungry, you know the path has only one end, your faith starved down to a blister, and every promise left to rot unburied in the road behind you. The banners you die for are soaked not in glory, but in blood gone stiff and black buzzing with flies. You tie your oath into a knot, believing it will hold off the rot, but the worms start feasting before the last words leave your lips. The Templar cross, so white in the preacher's mouth, turns red by noon and brown by dusk, a rag for wiping pus and bile from broken faces. The only incense left is the stench rising from corpses stacked higher than the walls. On my honor by this holy standard, you repeat it as if faith is armor, while the flag above you drips down onto your tongue thick as curdled milk. William of Tyre praised sworn brotherhood, but what's brotherhood when you pull arrows from your friend's guts just to reuse the shaft before he's cold? Each sworn vow cracks like old bone, and the only thing left sacred is the silence after someone stops screaming. The worms do not care whose oath they eat, they chew the parchment and swallow the signet just the same. The Knights Templar, a new history, is a ledger of promises written in blood, read by vermin in the dark. You didn't carve an eternal name, you left a feast for everything that thrives on defeat. Perhaps the Grail was never a cup, but what the soil drinks promise by promise from the men who bled too loudly to be saints. The banner, the oath, the name, all dissolve in loam, and even the standard ends wriggling. So raise your colors high if you must just know the next time they flutter it will be over a mass grave, a banquet for the patient sacred worm. You prayed for salvation and woke to marrow-rattling silence, the kind that seeps from piles of the fallen and makes psalms rot right in your throat. The scent that lingers isn't incense. It's bone dust and congealed blood clotting in the gutters, sweetened by the lies you whispered to keep the hunger down. You waited for miracles, but the only thing that multiplied was the grave pit, a communion of splintered ribs and teeth gnawed by city dogs. The banners are moth-eaten, now shrouds for the ghosts that wander alleyways with no mouths left to pray. Relics traded hands, but the only thing holy is what the crows pass between their claws. The Knights Templar imagined glory would rise from carnage. What rises instead is smoke coiling from the pyre's faith, Burned to ash promises snapped in two like a saint's femur. William of Tyre chronicled miracles, but no one records the way the living cough up hope one blood-flecked rag at a time. Maybe the Grail never needed a guardian. Maybe it's just the gap left by every vanished brother, every orphaned oath. If miracles came here, they crawled into the cracks, curled in despair, and emerged as bones, stacked, gnawed, and anonymous beneath the stones. The aftermath is a city haunted by its own shrine. Every relic a lie, every skeleton a broken litany. So gather what scraps you can if your hands still work. There are no more blessed victories, just the clatter of bones underfoot and the sacred taste of dust gritty as judgment on your tongue. Here every miracle ends in silence, and Jerusalem keeps its secrets locked behind teeth and stone long after the prayers have dried and the worms have had their fill.